to join me here, hopefully. But right now, it's best to get this episode out now because I'm still trying to get through this book throughout the rest of this month before eventually going to the week before my birthday to finally cover Kingdom Come. But for now, we're still doing Justice League: The World's Greatest Superheroes by Paul Dini and Alex Ross, this time going over Shazam: The Power of Hope. Now, I haven't heard as much background on this story that we're covering right now specifically, but but I am at least, but I am very certain that all of you are very aware of the history of of Billy Batson as for now. But for those, but but at least just to give a little background on about this character. This character, Billy Batson, originally Captain Marvel, well, he wasn't originally made by DC or Marvel Comics. He was originally owned by Fawcett Comics as a competitor for Superman, just to compete with DC Comics for the character. But DC ultimately didn't like that, so they bought the company out, and then they had the character for themselves. But then suddenly, we then fast forward a couple years later, then Marvel Comics came in with their own Captain Marvel. And so then, and the two were pretty much competing against each other on the name of Captain Marvel, which their Captain Marvel, as Captain Marvel, though he had pretty much a similar name as just Captain Marvel, but he has a completely different background as to Billy Batson, the Billy Batson Captain Marvel. But then so just to avoid that copyright issue, just from that, they called it, they're trying to, in order for DC to do Captain Marvel comics, they labeled it as Shazam just for this, but they still called him Captain Marvel. And so then, fast forward a couple years later, and then somewhere around 2011, DC just gave up on this and went, screw it, let's just call this character Shazam, even though that's already the name of the wizard that granted him his powers. But in this story, he's still called Captain Marvel. Though the story is called Shazam: The Power of Hope. Excuse me. Though he's still called Captain Marvel, because again, just from if you recall earlier. So now we get into the main events of the story. And so we open just like with the previous two stories of Justice League: The World's Greatest Superheroes online. Fizz Chozo's here in the chat. How you doing? So then, just like with the previous two stories that I've covered here on this show, we open with a panel that explains pretty much the origins of the character, and it's usually told in the first, and it is told in the first person. Though this time, instead of being told in the perspective of the hero of the story that we are in the perspective of, it is instead in the perspective of Shazam, the wizard who granted Billy Batson his powers. And it actually reads this: there is an eternal battle between mankind and the dark forces that seek its destruction. For thousands of years, I used the powers of the ancient gods and heroes to fight on the side of righteousness. But my time on the mortal plane grew short, and I searched for a new champion to take my place. From a distance, I saw young Billy Batson, a good-hearted boy, casted out by a cruel uncle. But Billy persevered without complaining. Within him, I sensed the worthy soul I had been seeking. I sent my mystic emissary, who brought the boy forth me, who brought. Is this an actual comic or rewrite? This is an actual comic I'm actually covering right now. I sent my mystic emissary, who brought the boy before me. I told I told Billy of the great struggle for mankind's soul. If he accepted my offer, Billy would be granted the power to defend the poor and helpless. He could use this gift to right wrongs and crush evil everywhere. From the names of the ancients, I had fashioned my own. By invoking it, the boy would become the mightiest hero in the world. Speak my name, Shazam! And so Captain Marvel is bo- and so Captain Marvel was born. And so now we then actually open with the story. This time we open with a volcano eruption that's about to erupt next to a city. And and just before it would, Captain Marvel. I'm still calling him Captain Marvel because that's actually what he's named here in the story. Because Shazam is already the name of the wizard that granted Batson his powers, and so then Captain Marvel is already trying to find a way to not let the volcano erupt to the nearby city so that the lava will not spread. And so he first actually punches a hole in the volcano where it's outside of the city, but it's actually right where the water side is. And so then, and as soon as he does that, he then gets a large boulder, and then he fl- he flies over to get a large boulder, then tosses it into a volcano so that the lava just to plug up the eruption. And then once we actually and once and then the next we actually see an entire compilation of him actually going around saving the day, such as he's actually saving robbers from stealing money, from smuggling money. He's actually saving a gorilla from escaping so that he won't harm anyone, saving it from being tranquilized. He's and then he's also saving a nuclear power plant from a meltdown. And and then once he's actually going in all these adventures, this is actually all being told by Billy Batson at Wiz at Station Wiz, which is the place that he works for um to recall all the adventures of Captain Marvel to give people hope. It's actually just to give people hope, just for this. And he actually works, and like I already said before, the reason why he works there is because I already mentioned before is that he was meant to be originally he was meant to be a competitor from Fawcett Comics as a competitor for Superman. So similar to Superman, he works as a reporter for the Daily Planet, or not the Daily Planet. Works as a reporter just so he can actually count up on all the adventures of the hero that they actually are, just for their alter ego. And so then when he's just beginning to wrap up, he was about to actually get tickets for the game, for a baseball game. And so then but suddenly he's actually stopped by it actually says it here. He's actually stopped by the boss's assistant, Mrs. Phillips, and she actually shows Batson that there's an entire bag of letters that want to know about Captain Marvel. He's just like, and he has a tired look on his face. It's just like, oh boy, guess I'm gonna have to kiss the baseball game goodbye. And now I'm gonna be working overnight on all these letters of people that have been sending me letters to Captain Marvel about Captain Marvel. And so then we actually see this panel right here. Yeah, right here, where it just says that it actually says it's the burden of a celebrity, where he's just gonna be going home, doing his normal life, but yeah, he has all this, like it's a Santa, like it's an entire bag of presents, like Santa Claus is just coming in, and then he just goes upstairs, and then he tries to get it straight through the door. He tries to get it straight through the door, and then he finally reaches it into to his desk just so he could read through all the letters, and he actually whizzes through all of them. But then once he actually whizzes through all the letters, there's actually one letter in particular that's actually from Dr. Miller at the city's children's hospital, and she asks if there is any. She asks in the letter. She asks Batson to if he can get Captain Marvel to visit to visit the hospital because kids really want to see Captain Marvel. And so then, and because of that, she also, along with this letter, there's also an entire drawings of Captain Marvel that the kids drew on this part here, which even though he's beginning to feel tired, that actually brought a smile to his face. And so then that actually did give him the idea, but before he actually does, he then powers up as Captain Marvel, and then he goes to see Shazam, the wizard. And so then once he actually goes to see him at the Rock of Eternity, it says here, it actually says here, he actually explains this part here. Here. It is at that time, he explains, you must be your strongest, not only for yourself, but for those who find inspiration in everything Captain Marvel presents. Children are the most impressionable, for they are the ones who believe most deeply. Like a small fire, their faith in their champion burns brightly, but it must be nourished or it will die out. So then he explains to the wizard that, Captain Marvel explains to Shazam that he's about to go go to the children's hospital to visit kids as Captain Marvel. But then he also reveals to him that there will be a face of despair. It says here, the wizard reveals he has seen a day when one special child will face despair and look to Captain Marvel for hope. He advises me to be ready. But about the child, or when I will meet him, the old man says no more. So he's pretty much vague about it, and it's something that Batson will have to see for himself. And so Batson, now as his normal self, he actually goes to find where the hospital is, and he sees and he actually does see to where it is. But then suddenly, as soon as he turns around, suddenly a truck comes in. There's actually a blind girl. I assume that must be a blind girl because she actually has a cane. Yeah, it's actually because she actually has a cane. But then a semi truck comes in, but it's about to crash. But luckily, Batson actually powers up as Captain Marvel. He comes right in to save her, and luckily she's safe. So then afterwards, now that he's actually Captain Marvel, he actually comes in. We actually see a boy in a wheelchair actually just tossing a ball to himself. Is just tossing it up before catching it. And then suddenly, as he catches it up, Captain Marvel actually catches it as he's actually flying in and says, "Mind if I play too?" So then he just comes down. He just flies down. But then a lot of the kids see him. They actually huddle around him because they're really excited to see Captain Marvel. Because they've actually been waiting for this moment to finally see him. And then suddenly, Dr. Miller comes in and actually tells that and she actually thanks Captain Marvel for coming in. And so thanks Captain Marvel for coming in, and then Captain Marvel plans that he'll spend a few days with them. And actually says here, this weekend you guys are the bosses. You'll tell me what you'd most like to do, and we'll do it. And so then he actually catches the ball back to the boy in the wheelchair, but then he actually tosses it, and the boy catches it in his baseball glove. But instead of tossing it back, he actually drops it and drops the baseball mitt, and then he just goes away. And and then Batson is actually certain that he is actually that child, that child in despair that he's actually found. But then now he's actually in the hospital. So now he's in the hospital, and the kids actually look, and they're just as excited to see Captain Marvel. And now that he's actually planning to spend a few days with them, now he's basically granting them wishes. Now that he's here, now he's asking them, "What would you like me to do now?" And now some of them actually say that they just want to like, oh my gosh, we want to go on these adventures with you. We want to fight alongside you. We want to fight against. We want to fight crime just like you. We want to be exactly like you. And there are some simple requests like they want to go to the zoo with him. They actually want to fly. They actually want to fly with him. But then again, they because they're impressionable, they want to go on these adventures. And though dangerous it may be, he still actually grants them that request. So then he goes on these adventures. So then he takes the kids on these crazy adventures. Like he takes some of the children to the zoo, and he's actually juggling bears, which is actually in the center, here, which you can't actually see it because of this page. But yeah, he's actually in a circus. He's juggling bears. There's a kid that's actually trapped, whose foot is stuck in on the train tracks. But then there's a train coming. He can't actually get out. But then Captain Marvel stops the train, and just in time to save the boy. Then they see the children as Captain Marvel is just fighting giant robots. They so Then they see Captain Marvel fighting some of his adversaries, like what's his name, I keep wanting to say Doctor Selvig. Um, Hold on, I'm gonna look this up right now. Doctor Savannah, that's who it is. Um, yeah, we actually see Doctor Savannah as a cameo in there, and then we see him going on to and then we actually see him going to the zoo, and there's actually pretty much an escaped tiger. And once again, just like what he did with the gorilla, he spares it from being tranquilized, and he actually uh uses and he actually uses yeah, exactly, that's who it is. The Lex Luthor stand-in for Captain Marvel, well, Dr. Savannah. And so then he actually similar to the gorilla, he actually brings a tiger back into the cage where it's actually supposed to be. He sparing it from being tranquilized. And then he's also saving the planet from falling meteors. Here's Captain Marvel's going on these crazy adventures, but suddenly, when there's any other children who want to do next, there's actually a doctor. Dr. Miller actually he grants a request for Captain Marvel that there's actually this girl named Nadia. This is actually the blind girl that was saved by Captain Marvel earlier. She's actually lost her sight, and there's a chance. It actually says. So then, actually, I should actually explain here. And he actually explains basically what that feels like. The kids, the kids all promise, and before they know it, they are with Captain Marvel as he fights another one of his fantastic battles. They hear the screech of the brakes as Captain Marvel stops the train from hitting a trapped girl. Well, the gasps with the circus and the circus audience as Marvel juggles trained bears for a charity show. They feel the ground shake as the captain takes on rampaging monster robots. And it's, there's laughter as I introduce them to old friends, and cheers as Captain Marvel defeats another evil adversary. And even though the kids might find some of my stories a bit far-fetched, all of them can imagine themselves in the adventures right along with the captain. But sadly, not every wish is so easily granted. Dr. Miller tells me Nadia's eyes were damaged in an accident, there is a chance to save her sight, but the process is specialized that few doctors have the skill to perform. I learned that a surgeon in Japan has been contacted has been contacted about Nadia's condition, but the girl is not strong enough to endure a long trip. When with the time being of the essence, I decided to bring the doctor to the patient. Mere minutes later, I am in Tokyo looking for Dr. Nozawa. Some helpful townspeople direct me to the hospital, and soon after, I locate the doctor himself. Dr. Nozawa agrees to come with me. He provided the journey does not keep him away from his other patients too long. I promised the doctor that he will be back home no later than Monday. To ensure a safe flight over the North Pole, I ask I ask him to buckle himself securely into his car. Or I tell him he might also want to turn on his heater. Oh, we actually got a special guest here. Wolf 10 Media. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Oh, doing well. I mean, just already at the Act 1, still at the pretty much the beginning stages of not the beginning stages, the first act of the story of the story. We're just specifically at right where he's actually trying to get the doctor, Dr. Nozawa, to save Nadia, the blind girl that he saved earlier in the story, for her condition because she lost her
A
sight in.
blind girl?
Yeah, because he saved her a lot earlier when he was still Batson. He was still trying to find where the hospital's at just to make sure if he got the right address. Because that's where he's made sure. But then suddenly a truck comes in almost and tries to stop the brakes because he didn't see her. So then he actually gets ready. Batson powers up as Captain Marvel. And then he zooms in to save her, and luckily she's fine.
Oh, that's good.
hmm Anyway, so now
True heroism.
because that's always the thing about Alex Ross stories is that he knows true heroism that you've seen a lot of in his stories, especially in the previous two episodes of the show.
Hmm.
And so now and so now once he's actually back to bringing Dr. Nozawa to help Nadia's condition about her sight, he then goes back into the bringing all these kids to these adventures. Some of them he's actually goes flying with him. Some of them are actually taken to the zoo. Some are actually went to go to the aquarium to actually see fish.
In short, wholesomeness.
Mm-hmm. In fact, some of them are actually in a bubble probably in this airtight bubble that he actually takes them in to actually see the fish in person that we actually see here. He's actually in this
Oh,
glass bubble,
nice.
and then suddenly, this next adventure is now they actually are taking a bunch of kids into, or no, I'm not actually wanted to save them. Actually wanted to go flying with him into going on these adventures, seeing the wilderness. So then all the kids are packed into a van. There's actually an adult who is actually in the van, actually as the driver. So then now he actually takes them flying to see the wilderness, but suddenly there's actually a nearby explosion, and there's a dam that's about to crack. And so once he actually hears that, he puts the van down from a safe distance, at a far and safe distance to where the van will not actually flood, so that they won't actually get sent away from the dam once the water begins to flood, once it begins to crumble. And so just to delay that event from happening, he actually goes to find some rubble to actually plug up the crack. That way the water does not leak when it's gonna begin to crumbling just from the pressure of the water. But then suddenly he hears another explosion, and then this is where the true cause of the dam that's about to crack, and there's actually smugglers there that are and this is a government area, and so what they're really doing is that they're trying to find a closed mine. That way they could smuggle some ores just for money. And so then he goes there and just tries to tell them to stop. And he tries using peaceful purposes to try to tell them to stop. Like, I will tell you this once. Please, please surrender now. There's a dam that's about to crack. But then suddenly they don't actually listen. And they're pretty much, it sounds like they're pretty much intimidated just from the opposing look that Captain Marvel actually is supposed to be. So then one of them brings out a double barreled shotgun and he tries to shoot him, but that doesn't even work. He tries warning them the second time, but then one of them tries to run him over and then he says, "Okay, you've had it." So then one of them tries to run over with the bulldozer. So then one of them actually takes a bulldozer and actually tries to break to break out the scooper part of the bulldozer, or then he actually breaks it off to and actually tries to stop them as best he can. But then the guys who actually set off the explosion, they try to detonate it anyway, just so they can actually try to set up another one, which that only brings down another avalanche. So then it would actually so that would still crack the dam. So then he apprehends. They didn't get away for long, so they tried to do this to run away. They didn't get away for long, and so he tries to apprehend them. He actually sends them somewhere to safety far off from the dam. That way they'll actually be taken away to the police. But suddenly the dam actually begins to crumble. The water actually starts flooding, and right where the kids are, it's about to be flooded, and they're actually going to be sent away. So then he comes in to save them, and then he actually does. But he's relieved that they saved them, but he's actually afraid that he's also guilty that he was almost like some hero I am, just putting them in danger unknowingly. And he actually begins to hear cries that they're actually doing that, and there's a look on his face just that, yeah, I'm ready to face the consequences for my actions of that happen. But instead of being cries of horror that he's actually hearing when he opens the van, it's instead cries of excitement. It's just because they're actually going, "Oh my gosh, that was amazing! There's a dam that flooded. We almost there's actually a dam that flooded. We almost got sent away and we almost crashed, but luckily we got saved by Captain Marvel. That is so amazing." And the look on his face again is just relieved, just goes, "Whew." And he knows the consequences of that actions, but luckily they're just happy that they were saved by Captain Marvel. So then he brings them back to the hospital, and yet they're actually impersonating that exact moment that just happened. And so then he goes to talk to Dr. Miller about that adventure that just happened. And he actually says here, I assure I assured Dr. Miller that everyone is safe, and if she feels my presence is having a stressful effect on the children, I will cut my life short. But Dr. Miller, or Ellen as she asks the captain to call her, because now we know her for real name as Ellen Miller, Dr. Ellen Miller, who's actually one of the doctors in this hospital who sent the letter to Captain Marvel for the favor to visit the children. Um, she tells me not to be silly about this because the time I'm spending with the kids is doing them a world good. Medicine is important to any patient's recovery, but so much is human contact. Ellen says the fact that Marvel's willing to be Marvel's willing to be a friend to the kids provides that he is a caring person, warm and very giving. So so he's still very much giving them hope. So it's almost like not only as much as their idol that they idolize, but pretty much as exactly what their friend would do as a friend. Uh, you know. So then then he asked Dr. Miller or Ellen Miller about this boy in the wheelchair that he saw earlier, that he first saw when he came flying down. That he came flying down when he first arrived at the hospital as Captain Marvel. He tells her that his name is Bobby, and he's actually suffered. And she says that he has suffered from a bad fall down on his basement stairs at his home, which is pretty much why he's actually in the wheelchair. And at any rate, it actually says, at any rate, that statement, the boy's father gave the doc. It actually says, Ellen says Bobby has suffered a bad fall down his basement stairs. At any rate, that's the statement the boy's father gave the doctors, and Bobby has said nothing to contradict it. So then he tries to reassure him. He tries to ask him if is everything okay, but Bobby is just silent. But he also sees that there's actually bruises on his arm, and he didn't even need the wisdom of Solomon to tell him deliberately about those inflictions on those wounds. And this is actually something that pretty much is lost since 2011 um, with Billy Batson, is that they still portray Batson whenever he is. They still portray Batson as just like a eccentric, or not eccentric, but basically a man child in the newer stuff that they're doing with Captain Marvel or Shazam that they now call him, because they just gave up on that. It's just like, screw it, let's just call him Shazam. That they never even gave him the wisdom of Solomon, because Shazam is still the acronym of the Greek heroes that he's actually taking after. So then the first S in this name is actually for Solomon, is the wisdom of Solomon for this. He has that for that reason. He would pretty much, like, say if he would know like a group of monsters that he's never even seen before, but yet with the wisdom of Solomon, he would pretty much know them pretty much instantly. And so then, anyway, and so then, so now that he's not silent, he doesn't even think that he's not willing to speak to Captain Marvel, and so then another way, he's not going to try to force him to talk, but another way that he will talk is if he talks to someone a bit similar to him. And so that's when he goes back to being Billy Batson in a in a closed space. That way no one even so that he won't actually reveals to who he is. I have no problem with Shazam being portrayed as a child in an adult's body, as being a child in an adult's body is the concept. I mean, well, yeah, because that's already been part of the sidekick archetype in superhero comics that started way back from Robin. Because when Robin came out, he was immensely, actually going off topic, when Robin came out, he was immensely popular, because even though children would impersonate their favorite hero like Superman or Batman, but the problem is they'd be either a bit older. So then DC and Marvel actually notice about this, even with their heroes, that they are older. So then the way they did this is that they would make a younger character that would live vicariously through your hero, so that you could be Robin, you could be Dick Grayson, the Dick Grayson Robin, you could be Wally West, Kid Flash, you could be Bucky Barnes for Captain America. So he was the first. The second is Captain Marvel, Billy Batson. So then that's when they would say, what if you said a magic word and then instantly you become an adult? So then you have the wisdom of an adult, the strength of an adult, and the responsibilities of an adult. That's the portrayal of Billy Batson. Billy Batson to becoming Captain Marvel. And the third and final one to wrap this up with the sidekicks that did this is Peter Parker, Spider-Man. So then he's the one sidekick who is not actually known through another moniker from another hero. Like, he's not Spider-Boy, he's actually called Spider-Man, so he's actually being his own character. And so And so then, so yeah, he's basically just his own thing. So he's not known by another hero, like fighting alongside with another hero. He's already his own man. You know. So that's pretty much all the sidekicks. So yeah, if that already sums up everything, or actually gives you the picture, actually. So then now, Captain Marvel goes back to being Billy Batson, just so he could actually get to talk to, so that he would talk to Bobby, and he actually tells him that he's a baseball fan too. So then they actually engage in a conversation that they're actually in a topic that they're actually fans of. Both are baseball fans, and so then he tells him where did he get those bruises on his arm, and he tells him that he's been beaten badly um, through his father, and then he tells him that he actually feels that too. Well, though not through his father. Excuse me, not through his father, but his cruel uncle that we saw earlier in the through the through the pages in the first story before we actually get to the events of the story and his origins. So then, when he hears about this, he then goes to he asks him where his house is, and that he'll tries to just to talk to his father. And so then he tells him. Then Batson goes there, and then he knocks on his door to tell about his father. And we see that he's very much like any father that you would think. This is basically what Bobby's father actually looks like here. And so then he tries to tell him about, and he's less happy, or actually no, he tries to tell him about Bobby, and tell him, can you please be kind to Bobby this time around, because he told me everything. And then Bobby's dad tells him, why don't you go mind your own business? And then he tries to protest, but he just rudely shuts the door on him. So then he goes for another option, and then he turns back into Captain Marvel. And then he actually sees the light emitting from the window on his door to see that, because that's actually lightning when he says Shazam. And then he turns into Captain Marvel. He gets a baseball bat just to tell him, like, hey kid, I'm done. Why don't you mind your own damn business? But then he opens the door. Then he's actually interrupted. And it's just like, oh shit, that's actually Captain Marvel. And then he tries to beat him anyway, but he catches it, and then he tosses it just for that. And then he tells him with it pretty much in conviction, that pretty much in a thundering voice, but yet he actually means it. It's just like, I need you to give Billy a chance. That I'm giving you a chance. Actually says this. There's a look of terror in Mr. Bronsky's face. Bronsky is Bobby's dad, the name of Bobby's dad. Bronsky's eyes as he sees Captain Marvel tower above him. I'm sure it must be the same look Bobby had in his eyes every time his father threatened him, because this is the reason why Bobby didn't felt silent when he sees Captain Marvel, because he sees him like that intimidated by him. He thinks he might have actually abused him when really he isn't. So then, and he says, when the captain speaks, his words roll out like thunder. I'm giving you a chance you don't deserve to make things right with Bobby. Go see him, apologize, promise my friend, you will never hurt promise my friend you will never hurt him again, because I will surely be back if you do. So he's just reassuring him that he's not going to be like he's not just like doing this like Batman, like he's just going to be like hanging him over on top of a building, but he's just telling him, because he's already intimidated already by the presence that just by Captain Marvel just towering over him. It's just like, I need you to be nice to Billy this time. I need you to make things right. Next time I see you doing that, I will turn you into the police.
He don't make empty threats.
Right, yeah. And so then later, now he actually goes to the final days in the hospital, and it's actually a really emotional scene here. So then later, it actually says this. Later, I visit the hospital's intensive care ward. The children here are very ill. Many have only the slightest chance of recovery. Still, they find the captain's presence cheering, if only for a little while. Though I am an adult in their eyes, they seem to know I am also someone who has never forgotten what it's like to be a kid. Frustration, triumph, despair, and joy. The memories of those and a thousand other childhood experiences stay with me, both as Billy and as Captain Marvel. It makes it easy for me to relate to children. They know that the captain will they know that the captain is always their friend and will be there when they need him most. Yet in their times when all of Marvel's powers cannot help me save a life, no matter how hard I try, no matter how hard I try, all I have to offer all I have to offer to Nita, it's actually the patient that he's actually seeing because she is ill. She's actually, I likely assume it's cancer, probably, because it is an intensive care. Is
Correct.
friendly. Yeah, all I have to offer to Nita is a friendly smile, a gentle hand, and a few words of comfort. In my mind, that's not nearly enough, but it has made her very happy. It has given her a reason to smile, a moment of relief from her fear and pain. And in that moment, she slips away. And as soon as, like, she smiles and then she closes her eyes and then she actually dies. And then he actually just holds her hand just in despair, like, even with that, I still couldn't, even with all my powers, I still couldn't save her.
Superman moment.
Exactly that. Exactly that. And so then now his days are up in the hospital. Now he's actually going to be leaving the hospital. So then before he actually leaves, he actually waves Ellen goodbye, and he also waves the kids goodbye. And that it was actually such a wonderful time actually seeing him be there for this, just for them. Just going on these adventures with him, they're so grateful for that because that's actually now given them hope. Because this is actually what the story is. It's the power of hope. And so then, he goes back to the Rock of Eternity to visit Shazam the Wizard, and then and then he asks him, and then he asks, says here, he asks if my time among the children was well spent. I have to admit that I am not sure. I'm grateful that I was able to bring some happiness to many of the kids, but part of me still feels powerless because I was not able to help them all. There There are some battles even Captain Marvel may not win, the old man says. That's true, sire. But even so, that doesn't make me want to stop trying. A part of me will always try to fight those battles and be there for those in danger of falling into despair, just as I was there for those kids. And the wizard nods. You have given them hope. It is as good and powerful and as good as powerful and powerful for it is a good and powerful force, one that I had feared someone young and dear to me was losing. Have you not yet realized who? So he's already explaining what the power of hope is. Like it is really powerful for this that he's given to these kids, but yet in this last sentence, I think it should be revealing that someone that young that he knew probably might be a reference to his daughter. I forgot who it was, but it's the same daughter who pretty much corrupted um Black Adam, who was the original man who actually gave him the powers before Batson. And so And so then Marvel actually says "Holy moly" about this because I think he probably knows exactly who he's actually talking about because he's actually met her before. And so then
I always love that catchphrase he says.
yeah, because I mean, of course, he's a kid. And so then he also gives Captain Marvel actually gives words of reassurance that he's in spite of all that you still save these children in spite of that you could not save some of them. You have done your mission well to actually give them hope. And so then it actually now says this. This wait, hold on, maybe. Yeah, he actually gives them words of wisdom, and then it actually says this. Any lingering doubts fall away as I fly home. I know life will always have struggles waiting for both Billy and the captain, but right now, I feel I could take on the world. My heart is as light as a child, a feeling I'd nearly forgotten, and by helping those in need, I will be able to keep that feeling alive. And so then, after he then flies away from the Rock of Eternity, he then visits Bobby's house again, and he seems to be doing better this time around. He's actually not in the wheelchair anymore, and it looks like he's actually recovered from his injuries. Batson goes to see him just as a friend, and they're actually playing catch together just for that. And so then ends this powerful story of Shazam, the power of hope. And what a roller coaster it pretty much was.
Excellent storytelling.
And so, Wolf, even though you got here like a bit late, or not actually a bit late, sometime later, what did you think of the story?
Pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Um, actually, wow, that's actually might be the shortest story I've actually ever done on this show. The shortest episode I've actually ever done on the show by far. But but it is actually pretty much more powerful. But yeah, like I said, this is already powerful. This is actually what the power of hope is. Like, as long as you don't, as long as you actually keep hope alive, you would actually feel as you could actually take on the world. You would actually feel you would actually be, yeah, like you would actually take on the world, like he actually said. Actually, Dominic's outro actually says this best. Anytime when he leaves on the UN space to even here, um, when he was on my show once, or actually twice probably, um, that even though times are dark, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And you always keep pursuing it as long as you keep hope alive. That's always the thing we always have to keep striving for. In fact, this is pretty much like one of the stories that is DC Comics at its finest, where even though there's already three representatives that actually the DC Trinity already represent what their biggest aspect is about these characters. Like Superman is hope, what they're supposed to be. Superman is hope, Batman is justice, and Wonder Woman is truth. Because that's what these guys fight for. Even the Justice League, that's what they fight for. And especially all of them actually fight for truth, justice, and the American way. That's how they found it. That's basically the uniting goal that this one goal that they actually fight for for the Justice League, what they fight for. And the reason why I say that this story is DC at its finest is because that's what DC should be about. It's about hope.
Should be a mandate whenever somebody gets hired on there, or at least when the executive goes on there, it should be a mandate to instill hope.
Yeah,
That's what the
exactly.
superheroes are supposed to be about. It's what they're meant to be about.
Yeah.
Yes, you can have some catharsis, but at the end of the day, they're always doing something right, regardless of everything going wrong, no matter what. That's the whole principle of these superheroes, and that was always been the principle of the superhero when it was made around the times of strife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's pretty pretty much the whole. That's pretty much the whole thing of why Joel Schuster and Jerry Schumacher, or no, not Jerry Schumacher, Jerry Siegel, when they made Superman. That's the whole reason why they made that. Why they made him. In fact, what was I about to say about this? In fact, Marvel actually knows about this too. And that's not only about superhero comics, that's even what storytellers are supposed to do. Because they instill hope, to quote Walt Disney, Tom Hanks Walt Disney in Saving Mr. Banks, that's what stories we are here to instill hope because that's what storytellers do. They instill hope again and again and again to at least they instill hope again and again and again to restore order because that's what
Mrs. Banks.
storytellers do. Saving No, it is Saving Mr. Banks.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah,
it's Mrs. Banks.
no, because Mr. Banks's whole struggle because it's about Mr. Banks's whole struggle during the creation of Mary Poppins. And so, well, not every story would have that because unless if you're making a horror story where you have to get readers on the edge of their seats to be so much in suspense, especially for a thriller, or if you're making a tragedy and your job there is to provide some catharsis, then yeah. But the biggest thing about storytelling, like if you're telling about superheroes or if you're telling hell Final Fantasy, what they know about this, because any message in a Final Fantasy, the overall message in every Final Fantasy game, what it should be is always hope over nihilism because that's what storytellers do. Because what Final Fantasy games do best is that even though in spite of being a video game and it's in being interactive and such, what they do best, all of them actually do best, is that you're actually playing through a story. Like you see the character struggles, you see actually whether they are like the Warriors of Light, where they're actually heroes that are meant to be there to instill hope, or actually a rebellion fighting against an evil empire, or an empire that's trying to fight for man's destiny, but is really causing an all-out war, or or a megalomaniac, or someone wanting to be or either an evil god, or someone wanting to be a god that wants to destroy the world. Hope, no matter how much, even like in Final Fantasy 6 and Final Fantasy 15, like even when it seems like the end of the world, when everything is destroyed, all it takes is a new day. It takes tomorrow to actually rebuild everything back up, because that's an overall, because it keeps it the continuity of message of any Final Fantasy game is hope over nihilism. Because if you're a storyteller, like telling a hero story, like telling tales about heroes, you always need to instill hope again and again and again and again, because that's what they should do in order to restore order when even things get dark. So, yeah.
I'd say that's well said.
Mm-hmm.
You standing on your own 2 feet on that one, and you'll die
Mm-hmm.
on that hill. No doubt with you there.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that actually about does it here. That's actually the shortest episode I've done here. That actually about does it for this video. And yeah, that actually about does it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like what you saw, click like and subscribe and share with your family and friends. And make sure you ring that notification bell. That way you get notified of our latest videos. And be sure you stay tuned around this week. Actually, be sure you stay tuned tomorrow. Actually, scratch that. Be sure you stay tuned tomorrow on Wolf's channel for an anime spotlight tomorrow, as he will be doing an anime spotlight on Steam Boy. Is that right?
Yep, it's
Hmm?
Otomo's second animated movie. Very expensive movie too. It's
Ultima. What was the first?
Akira.
That's right. And, and be sure you stay tuned on this Thursday, still here on my channel, as I will cover episode 4 this time. This time, the next story will be Wonder Woman Spirit of Truth. Be sure
Oh,
you
I'm
stay
down
tuned.
for that.
Be sure you stay tuned for that. And this Friday will be a full-fledged video on my channel on this time on Final Fantasy Rules, covering the Red Mage class. Then next week, I think on the 31st, March 31st will be our final story in this book, which will be Justice League, Liberty, and Justice. And finally, the final episode for a while, actually, not the exact final episode, like the final episode for at least a while, the week before my birthday, will be celebrating for my birthday. We'll be celebrating Kingdom Come. Be sure you stay tuned for that because we got a lot to say about this one because
Oh yeah.
it is a great story. And oh yeah, and it will be laid to rest for a pretty long while after that because then in episode 7, be sure you stay tuned for June. Be sure you stay tuned for June for comic studies as I will cover Superman for all seasons in June as part of celebration of Superman's 85th anniversary. Be sure you stay tuned for that one. And once then, Wolf, would you like to say goodbye first before I end off?
See you around, everybody.
All right. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching. This is Final Fantasy Fan 12 signing off. And remember, if you want to be a storyteller, be sure you instill hope again and again and again in order to restore order, and may the light forever shine upon us.